Today I'm going to talk about reactors and how their roles and bonuses actually work on the skill damage math, because I'm seeing a lot more people confused on this than there should ever be. Not to mention there's a lot of confusion about what reactors you should be farming for Haley this week. But after looking around on YouTube, I'm not certain that I've actually seen anyone fully explain the reactor math, and I thought they had, so that's my bad. Had I known that was the case, I would have made this video a whole lot sooner. And hopefully now that this video is being made, it can serve as a reference for all future discussions, so we never have to have this talk again. We're going to start off super simple and establish a baseline formula for skill damage, and build on it as we cover more and more aspects of reactors and their skill damage. First up is the core of the reactor, the base skill power value. Unenhanced, this value will always be 11,060.96. It doesn't matter if it is purple or gold, the reactor value will be the same, and they can both enhance up to the same value of 11,724.62. This does not mean that there is no difference between the reactors, though. There is an important distinction we'll talk about here in a second. But next up is the skill power modifier, and this could be from any skill from any Descendant, but I personally chose to roll with Lepic's first ability Grenade Throw, since that will help me tie into some stuff I want to talk about. Lepic's first ability shows a skill power modifier of 585.4, and this is the percent modifier that you will apply to your resulting skill power. So a power modifier of 100% means that you will use 100% of your skill power. It does not mean that you take your skill power and add 100% as a bonus. And because this is a percent, we'll divide it by 100 to convert it to a multiplier instead of a percentage. And also a quick note, for most of these tests, I am not using an enhanced reactor. So the value you will see will be 11,060.96 on the base skill power, and if I ever change that, I will mention it. However, you'll notice the resulting damage number does not match what we see when we throw it against Pyro. But that's because you're pretty much never going to see the true damage numbers against enemies. There's virtually no scenario in the game in which you would. And that's because every enemy has different defense, resistance, damage reduction values. And while that is something I do want to talk about, I'm not going to talk about that today. So at the bare minimum, I will just establish for the sake of all our testing to come that when we throw a grenade at Pyro on hard, as it is a fire and tech skill, Pyro has a roughly 73.89 damage reduction value. So if you're confused on where I pull that number from later, that's where. But this means that if we throw a grenade at Pyro using a reactor with no matching weapon, no element or type bonuses, and no roll benefits, and no mods on our character, we will do roughly this value, which matches up. Next up to add to the equation is the weapon optimization bonus. This multiplies the base power before all other bonuses that come in, and if your weapon does not match, you're not going to get it. And that's what the missed means. So if you missed it, you will get 100% of base skill power, so a 1 times multiplier, meaning that the value remains unchanged. If you meet the weapon condition on a purple reactor, you get a 1.4 times bonus, or a 40% increase, and if you get the bonus on a gold reactor, you get a 60% increase instead. An important distinction between gold and purple reactors isn't just the amount of damage gained, because a gold reactor is a roughly 14% absolute damage increase, but you'll note that the phrasing on the condition changes from equipped to mounted. This just means that a purple reactor can give you the optimization bonus when the specified weapon type is equipped anywhere in your loadout, whereas mounted means that the weapon needs to be actively held in your hand in order to provide that bonus. That might sound really fucking annoying, but I promise for any boss-specific build, you are trolling yourself if you run a purple reactor. It doesn't matter if it has perfect gold rolls on it. If the reactor itself is purple, it's trash. But with that in mind, now it is our base skill power times our weapon optimization bonus times our skill power modifier. Throw in Pyro DR and the damage lines up. Some of you might chuckle that I added parentheses in here, but they are for what comes next, and that is the faction attack bonus, which many of you have heard of, the best being Colossus skill attack. Most of you have heard how good it is, but a lot more than I expected don't know why. Colossus attack is an added, not multiplied value that comes in after the optimization weapon bonus, but before anything else at all. We haven't even gotten to attribute type ratios, but that it can factor in before those do is kinda nuts. To show this though, I'll still use no mods or bonuses, so an off-element reactor, a non-tech bonus, but I'll match the weapon bonus this time and use Colossus attack. So now our formula is base reactor power times optimization bonus plus the Colossus attack, and then all of that together is multiplied by the skill power modifier. Throw in DR for Pyro again, and it does match up. Before we move on though, just keep in mind that the examples I use going forward might have reactors with different Colossus attack rolls, so the values will change slightly in each scenario. Next up are attribute and type ratio bonuses and boosts. And this is where we're going to talk about buckets, because I'm going to start saying bucket a lot in future vids, and already have in some of the vids prior to this one. When I say bucket, all I mean is a category within the damage equation where all the bonuses of its type add together with it. But that type of bonus itself is multiplicative against other bonuses bonuses within the equation. So in this case, with what we've shown so far, the grenade's power modifier of 5.854 times represents the total power modifier bucket, and all other power modifier bonuses are additive to it. That'd be like technician, tech specialist, any of the type power modifier mods. They all add together into this single bucket. Unlike power modifiers, though, power bonuses are different in that they all have their own buckets instead of adding together into one. So like a super common example is the Slayer set that you earn from hard mode Pyro. It says it gives you 26.1% skill power, and by the way, any component or mod that says skill power actually means power boost ratio. So Slayer gives 26.1% base skill power boost ratio, and if we slap on Slayer to what we have now, then our formula then becomes the same deal, but we throw in a times 1.261. And with Pyro DR, again, it matches up. You'll note though that even though the character breakdown will show the base ratio bonus as 0.261, I throw it into the equation as 1.261. That's because the base value can't be anything other than 1. As a bonus, that means you're getting more, and that more is of the base value 100%. So it's 100% plus 26.1%, 1.261. But it's not just Slayer that adds in a super strong multiplier. Slayer is strong because there are very few ways to actually boost the base power ratio bucket. Other notable options are like Spear and Shield. Even though it's very little, it's like an 8% increase, and then there is Dangerous Ambush, which can add like the 50% increase that it does against an immobilized target. Those would add together with Slayer's 26.1%, and the final value of all of those added together would be the base ratio multiplier. Beyond the base ratio bucket though, we have every different attribute as its own bucket. So chill, fire, electricity, non-attribute, they are all their own multipliers. However, since no skill can actually be both a fire or a chill skill at once, you're usually only operating with one of these, as running more than one won't gain you any additional skill power because skill power has to be applicable to the type of skill that you are applying it to. So in our case, the grenade is a fire skill and a tech skill. I can equip Fire Specialist to gain 81.2% more fire skill power, and building in on our formula from before, we now add the fire power boost ratio bucket, and we throw in a 1.812, and again, with Pyro DR, the value matches up. Up until now, I've intentionally been using a reactor that didn't match my skill attribute or type. Type meaning fusion, singularity, tech dimension, etc. Just so I didn't skew any of this math when I talked about it. But now that we've established how the buckets work, let's talk about how reactor substats would factor in. The reactor I used for the last few tests was a frozen singularity reactor. Frozen meaning its attribute was chill instead of fire, and singularity meaning its skill type was singularity instead of tech, which is the grenade skill type. These two power boost ratios add into their respective buckets. So now I will switch to my standard Lepic reactor, which is fire tech, not fire power modifier bucket. So the fire specialist we added earlier gives us 81.2% firepower, and then the reactor gives us an additional 20% firepower, meaning our total multiplier for firepower ratio boost will be 1 plus 1.012, so 2.012. The reactor substats are not separate from the standard power buckets established by your modules. They are one and the same. And then Colossus again, but a different value, and then I have duration and no other damage specific rule. This reactor is enhanced as well, so the base value will change as we mentioned before, and since tech power ratio is its own multiplier, because all power boosts are their own buckets as we mentioned before, that means that tech gets added in here as a new multiplier of 1 plus 0.2, so 1.2 times. And again, with Pyro DR, it matches up. So to reiterate, as a generalized formula, since we are where we're at, end skill damage is equal to base skill power times the optimization bonus plus faction skill attack. And then all of that times the base power ratio bucket times the applicable attribute power ratio bucket times the applicable skill type ratio bucket. And then all of that is multiplied by the power modifier bucket. And the power modifier bucket is the base ability power modifier plus regular skill power modifier plus applicable attribute power modifier plus applicable skill type modifier. And then before we talk about some of the confusion on Haley reactors going about at the time of this recording, I want to talk about Secret Garden. I've mentioned this before and I didn't really give any math on it, and I wanted to talk about it because people seem to be misunderstanding how this weapon bonus actually adds in. The weapon's relevant ability is that when using a tech skill, you have a 50% chance to gain a stack of pest control, and each stack can grant you different amounts of skill power. I say different amounts because the UI is hella confusing on this. And for once it actually means skill power, not base skill power ratio, which everything else that ever says skill power without an attribute associated with it means base skill power ratio. This means that it adds to the same bucket as your reactor weapon optimization bonus. It also does not give you 5% power for having it up in general, along with 16% per stack for 3 stacks. It just means that you get 5% on the first stack, and then 16% for every additional stack. So in total, you will come out with a 37% bonus to skill power. Add that to your 60% bonus from your weapon optimization, and it comes out to a 97% bonus. That is why Secret Garden is so juicy for any tech-based skill builds that can also take advantage of really small cooldowns, because maintaining garden stacks is kind of ass. Also note that some characters have multipliers beyond what we talk about here, like Bunny. If you watched my Bunny video, you already know about how her electricity bar scales her damage separately from everything else, and that's why it's so fucking good. But with that out of the way, let's move on to the confusion about reactor substats, which are the randomized rolls that you can get down at the bottom. We've explained why Colossus skill attack is as good as it is, adding in before any other multipliers go off. But while we've talked about the math for other options besides Colossus, I didn't go in depth on the other options as much as I figured the other creators had you covered. I assumed, and that's my bad. I'll use Lepic as a quick example before I talk about Haley, because I had people asking why Colossus plus Tech was the best possible Lepic roll in the substats. Using the last Lepic example that we had our formula as such. But since everything before the multipliers is going to be increased the same whether it is 1 or 100, since everything after is just multiplication, we will simplify the formula to remove some numbers. And this 1 represents the sum total base skill power after faction bonuses, weapon optimizations, all the above. So now all we have is just 1 times the base firepower boost ratio bucket, and then the tech power boost ratio bucket. And obviously we have 20% in both buckets due to our reactor. And then we have fire specialist equipped in our mods to give more to the fire ratio bucket, which is why our fire bucket is at 2.012 and our tech bucket is at 1.2. The maximum boost ratio substat can give is 8.5% or 0.085. So whether it be the fire ratio bucket or the tech bucket, the added value to the bucket will be 0.085 times. So say we shot for a fire bonus as our second stat, which changes our fire ratio multiplier to 2.097. The end value is 2.5164. And sure, that is more damage than before. The fire ratio bonus on a sub-roll isn't useless, but it's not great, because while sure the relative increase is the 8.5% in terms of an absolute damage increase, it is only a 4.2% to the total damage. The reason for that is simply that we already have a lot of damage in our fire ratio bucket, but we have virtually none in our tech ratio bucket. And because we already have so much in our fire bucket, and because tech is a separate multiplier, that means any amount more that we can add to the tech multi is going to be far more meaningful in terms of our absolute damage increases. And just to show that, if we add the 8.5% to tech instead of fire, that is a roughly 7% damage increase. Now obviously the roles can be reversed here at any time. The only reason tech is best over fire on a reactor sub is because we have no modules for our Descendant that can pump tech power as high as we can with firepower. And because of that, fire specialist is the best option to boost damage on the modules front, meaning that the reactor has much better access to damage increases after the fact. As such, the type ratio, not the attributes, so not fire or chill or any of that shit, those are always not so great, but singularity, fusion, dimension, tech, etc., will always be the best roll to get after you get Colossus attack on there, assuming we're talking about for boss builds. How does this all tie into Haley though? There are too many people saying that chill and singular are equivalent, and they are not. Haley has a lot of jank-ass math going around right now, and I do want to talk about that, but I won't be doing that in this video. Just know that hands down, skill type ratio bonuses on the reactor next to Colossus will always win. And some of you are probably going to bring up crit damage, but guys, the only way that crit damage wins over a skill type ratio boost on any character, assuming that you're using the 4 crit mods on your character, is if you can guarantee that you will crit 100% of the time. I don't mean 100% crit rate, because some bosses have crit resist. I mean, can you guarantee that every single shot will crit? Because if not, skill type will always win. But if you can guarantee it, then yes, crit damage would be better at a 10.7% absolute damage increase instead of the 7% that the type bonus would be.